Ask any Warhammer general what the most feared weapon on the battlefield is, and they'll all answer the same. The blade wielded by the god of death? Hardly. Scarbrands. Army-slaying axes. Please. The realm-shaping blows of Galmaraz, Sigmar's mighty hammer? Not even close. No. The greatest weapon that is, was, and ever has been is a net. Not just for making stockings out of, grots armed with nets have laid low every horror of the realms, be they beast, god, or mortal. The only saving grace is that their construction is a secret and the material's incredibly rare, otherwise Gloomspite Gits would have conquered the realms long ago with their ropey power. But we aren't here today to talk about netters. Rather, let me tell you the true story of the netter, the nameless grot who would be king, and the single most destructive moment in all of Age of Sigmar, the unleashing of a weapon of mass destruction so horrifying it immediately forced the powers that be to rewrite the rules of engagement. It's the 30th of June 2018, and the accidental Skaven corruption of Nagash's big, black, upside-down pyramid has caused the Necroquake and begun a mad war of unleashed souls across the realms. Endless spells have appeared for the first time. A Suki lady with really big feelings screams, "Don't look at me," while leading a brand new army of ghosts, and Sigmar reveals his newest weapon to counter them. Stormcast in robes. But all of that was merely the escalator upon which our glorious green grot shall rise. Shall rise, not rise. Damn it. The third iteration of the General's Handbook launched on the same day, and in its perfectly printed pages would be the raw materials capable of building a horrifying weapon of mass destruction from the most unassuming of combinations. While nowadays many respect the lunacy and potency of Gloomspite Gits, especially Squigs, from the beginning of the Age of Sigmar in 2015 until early 2023, they were about as threatening as a sleepy golden retriever puppy and even easier to beat up on the battlefield. But for this one shining moment, they were the apex predators of the mortal realms. Commanders had only just discovered the concept of issuing commands to their troops, where previously they would spend their hero phases just praying that their army played together better than the toddlers at a soccer match. They could also choose to take to the battlefield with less than the agreed upon points limit and could invest these missing funds into additional command points for the low price of 50 points a pop. Now, for our grot god to get good, he wouldn't just need a net and to believe in himself. He'd also need to discover the power of friendship. And that came in the form of a cave shaman coach, a loon boss cheerleader, and a very special bit of bling. The cave shaman generated extra command points, while his fancy Aether Quartz brooch returned any spent points on a roll of a 5+. Then, pom-poms swirling, skirts a-twirling, the loon boss would encouragingly command a simple unit of grot stabbers to stab him better than a usual stabbing, over and over and over again. The only limit to the amount of commands you could dish out was your available command points, and stacking abilities was absolutely within the rules of engagement. So our single wound grot squad leader's fearsome net went from damage 1 to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 32 to 64, and it could have kept going, but I guess damage 128 would have been a tad excessive. Our noble netter landed all 3 of his attacks, they all wounded and punched right through the armor of a unit of ogres, dealing 192 wounds from a single weapon. A moment of violence so disturbing that Khorne still checks under his bed at night for a grubby hand holding a bit of rope. Like taking salacious pictures for your dating profile, perspective is important. So let's do a quick comparison to the single warrior with the highest potential carnage the realms has ever seen. Vorgoroth the Scarred riding Scarlock, the skull host of Khorne. Angriest bloke on the biggest, reddest dragon. A miniature so large and heavy it was known to make tables bend and flex underneath it at events. If they hit and wounded with all 38 of their potential attacks, rolling at least 16 sixes in the process, they would still only do 138 wounds, a full 54 damage less than the green-skinned, net-bearing Frodo wannabe. However, the horror of our grot that would be king wasn't even close to done with 192 wounds. Oh no, the champion nettist was the icing, but the cake was thicker and greener than an entire convention of Ironjaw's players. The old souls among you may recall that this command didn't just apply to a single warrior, it applied to the entire unit, roughly 50 gits, all of whom were now damage 64, and they tore apart their enemies with the wanton abandon of an Aussie at 3 AM shoveling a kebab into his gaping maw. You may be thinking this is all just theory or hyperbole, the theory crafting of what could be done, but don't take my word for it. The Loon King responsible, Donal, has photos of the candle in the wind that was this list at events. Here it is, before and after dropping the dirtiest bomb ever to hit battlefields of the mortal realms. 9 Iron Guts and 7 Gluttons snuffed out faster than a bunch of millionaires in a scratch-built submarine. Together, they would have 64 wounds, meaning a single swing of the net would have accounted for all but one of those brave, beefy boys who had no idea they were facing off against a WMD that even Americans would consider a bit much. Fortunately for the netless soldiers of the mortal realms, the handbook of combat was swiftly rewritten to rein in this limitless source of power, and netters returned to still being the most powerful warriors that Age of Sigmar has ever seen. In the words of Loon King Donal, those 2 weeks pre-AOS 2 FAQ were the most glorious weeks in the history of AOS. There never has and never will be a better moment. That is how I feel about the 8th of July 2018. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Beautiful, poetic words from the commander responsible for the greatest atrocity in the history of the mortal realms. This video was brought to you by Jerkbirds. Do you want to love an animal that can't ever love you back? Does peace and quiet fill you with dread? Do you like things that literally poop wherever they are? Then get Jerkbirds. They go through every aviary in the country looking for the most unpleasant birds so that you don't have to. Each month they'll send you a new bird that is guaranteed to be more of a jerk than most regular birds. So stop being the biggest jerk in your house and make it a bird with Jerkbirds.